There is a house I visited once in Safed, in the old Kabbalistic quarter, the neighborhood where some of the greatest mystics in Jewish history lived and taught. And the first thing I noticed when I stood at the front door was not the mezuzah, not the stonework, not the courtyard beyond. It was two letters, small, written in black ink on a white ceramic tile set into the stone just above the doorframe. Not painted there by a craftsman, written by hand, with intention, by the family who lived inside. I had seen many things above many doorways in my years of study and travel, but something about those two letters stopped me. The woman who lived there, she was in her 70s, had lived in that house for 40 years, opened the door before I could knock. She saw me looking. She smiled the way people smile when they have been waiting a long time for someone to finally ask the right question. She said, "You recognize them." I told her I recognized the letters, but not their arrangement in this context. She said, "Come inside. I will explain what my grandmother explained to my mother and what my mother explained to me." What she shared over the next 2 hours in that stone kitchen in Safed is the core of what I am going to teach you today. My name is Rabbi Naomi. I have spent 37 years inside the sacred texts of Jewish wisdom, the Talmud, the Zohar, the writings of the Kabbalistic masters of Safed themselves, the generation of teachers who in the 16th century produced more profound wisdom about the mechanics of spiritual reality than perhaps any generation before or since. What I am going to share with you today is a practice so specific, so precisely preserved within certain family lineages, that most people who consider themselves knowledgeable about Jewish tradition have never encountered it in this form. It was not designed for public teaching. It circulated within families, passed from grandmother to granddaughter, from teacher to student, in the oral tradition that the written text can gesture toward, but never fully contain. I am releasing it today because the times we are living in are times of real financial pressure for real people, and this knowledge was always meant, ultimately, to help. But I need you to stay with me through the entire teaching. The two letters I am going to reveal and explain are not the complete practice. They are the visible surface of a 3-part architecture, and if you implement only the visible surface without understanding the architecture beneath it, the practice will not produce the result. The knowledge is only useful when it is complete. Stay until the end. Before we go any further, I want you to type the words, "Open the gate," in the comments right now. Write that before we move on. In the Kabbalistic tradition, the doorway of a home is called the sha'ar, the gate. A gate that is consciously named and consciously addressed begins to function differently than one that is passed through without attention. When you write those words in the comments, you are making a gesture toward your own threshold. Do it now. I read every comment, and I am looking for the people who bring their full attention to what I am about to share. Let me tell you first what the tradition says about the front door before I tell you what the two letters are, because without that foundation, the practice floats without roots and produces nothing. In the Zohar, the foundational text of Jewish mysticism, the doorway of a home is described as the makom of transition between two worlds. The world outside the door and the world inside the door are, in the tradition's understanding, governed by different principles. The outside world is the world of deen, of judgment, of the competitive and contracting forces that govern the marketplace and the public sphere. The inside world, when correctly maintained, is the world of chesed, of loving kindness, of expansive and generative energy, of the frequency that the tradition associates with abundance, with the overflow that happens when a vessel is correctly aligned with its source. The doorway is the membrane between these two worlds, and every time a person or an opportunity crosses that membrane, every time a guest enters, every time a business contact arrives, every time a piece of news comes through the threshold, It arrives filtered through whatever energy governs the doorway itself. The doorway is not passive. It is a filter and an amplifier, a declaration about the nature of the space it protects and invites into. When the doorway is consciously prepared, when it carries a deliberate spiritual designation, what enters through it arrives already attuned to the frequency of the interior. What would have entered as din passes through a correctly prepared threshold and arrives as something closer to the energy that can be received by a household in a posture of chesed. This is the function of the mezuzah, which most people know. But the mezuzah is the foundation of the threshold practice, not its ceiling. The two-letter practice I am going to teach you today is built on top of that foundation, and it activates something in the doorway's energetic function that the mezuzah alone, while essential, does not fully address. The two letters are shin and dalet. Shin and dalet. In Hebrew, the letter shin looks like a crown, 3 ascending arms reaching upward from a common base, the shape that the sages said mirrors the roots of a tree as seen from above, or the shape of a flame divided into 3 tongues. It is the first letter of 3 of the most significant divine names in the tradition: Shaddai, Shalom, Shekhinah. The letter Dalet is simpler in form, a right angle, a doorway shape, and the word Dalet itself means door in Hebrew. Dalet is the letter of thresholds. Dalet is the letter of passage, of the space between states, of the moment of crossing from one condition to another. Together, Shin and Dalet form the beginning of one of the most powerful names in the Kabbalistic tradition, Shaddai, the name of God that the ancient teachers associated specifically with blessing in the physical world, with provision, with the principle that the infinite makes itself available within finite, bounded reality. You have seen this name before, though perhaps not consciously. Shaddai is the name inscribed on the outside of every mezuzah scroll, visible through the small opening in the mezuzah case. Those letters are there for a specific reason that the tradition explicates at length. But the practice I am teaching you today takes those 2 letters, Shin and Dalet, out of the case and places them in direct sight. Written by hand in black ink, at the height of the eyes, above the doorframe, on the interior wall, so that every person who leaves the house sees them as they cross the threshold outward into the world. Note that careful detail. The interior wall, above the frame, at eye height, facing inward. These specifications are not arbitrary. They are the engineering of the practice. The letters face inward, toward the home, because their function is not to declare the household's status to the outside world. Their function is to declare it to the household itself. Every time a member of the household leaves, every time they cross from the interior world of chesed into the exterior world of din, they pass these 2 letters. They see, with their physical eyes, the abbreviation of the name that the tradition associates with bounded physical provision. They are reminded in the moment of crossing of what governs the interior they are leaving and to which they will return. The threshold crossing becomes a conscious act. The departure becomes a declaration, and departures made in a posture of declaration carry a different energy into the world than departures made in the fog of the ordinary morning. The person who leaves a home through a consciously prepared threshold goes out into the marketplace differently than the person who simply exits, not because the letters are magic, because the letters are practice. They are a technology for maintaining, in the act of threshold crossing, the frequency of the interior in the midst of the exterior. Now I want to tell you how to write them and what must accompany the writing, because the writing alone without what accompanies it is form without function, and form without function in the Kabbalistic tradition is called a klipa, a shell, an outer husk that carries no living energy. There are 3 components to this practice, as the woman in Safed taught it to me, as her grandmother had taught her, as the lineage stretches back through the teachers of that city, whose stone streets shaped the mystical tradition of the last 500 years. The first component is the preparation of the writer. Before the letters are written, the person who will write them, and it must be someone who lives in the home, not a craftsman, not a professional. This is not a commission, it is a declaration. Must wash both hands with intention. The same Netilat Yadayim practice that governs the morning. Water poured from a vessel, right and left alternating, 3 times each. This is not performative cleanliness. The hands, in the Kabbalistic framework of the Sfirot, the divine attributes, correspond to the attributes of Chesed and Gevura, the right hand to loving kindness and expansive energy, the left hand to boundary and containment. When the hands are ritually washed before an act of sacred writing, you are preparing the instruments of writing to carry both qualities simultaneously. The expansive energy of what you are inviting through the threshold, and the contained and bounded specificity of the intention you are encoding. Washed hands, prepared hands, hands that know what they are about to do. The second component is the material and the posture of writing. The letters must be written in black ink on white, not printed, not purchased, not reproduced from a template. Written. The reason the tradition insists on this, and it does insist, with a specificity that might seem excessive until you understand what is being encoded, is that the act of writing is itself an act of creation. The Hebrew word for letter is ot, which means both letter and sign. A sign is not copied, a sign is made. Every time you reproduce an image of something rather than making it, the energy of making is absent, and it is the energy of making that the tradition is harnessing. You are not decorating your doorway, you are creating a sign. The sign must be created in the act of writing, with your own hand, from your own intention. Use a good pen, use real ink, black on white, the combination the tradition consistently associates with clarity, with the contrast between the revealed and the unrevealed, with the way the Torah itself is written, black fire on white fire, the ancient teachers said. White ceramic tile if you want it to be durable, white card if you want to begin tonight. The medium matters less than the making. Write Shin first, the ascending letter, the letter of the divine name, the letter of the flame. Then Dalet, the doorway letter, the letter of passage, the letter whose very name means threshold. Write them at whatever size feels natural when you stand at your doorframe and look at the wall above it. They should be visible but not aggressive, present but not performing. The size at which you would hang a family name plaque is approximately right. The third component is the spoken declaration at the moment of placement. This is the piece most people are tempted to skip because it requires something that modern culture has become uncomfortable with. Speaking out loud, alone, with full intention, addressing something larger than yourself. But this is the component that the woman in Safed was most emphatic about. She said, and I am giving you the meaning rather than a transliteration, that when you place the letters above the door, you speak. You say that you are placing this sign at the threshold of your home, that you are naming this doorway as a sha'ar shel chesed, a gate of loving kindness and provision, and that what crosses this threshold does so under the governance of that name and that frequency. You do not need to say this in Hebrew. The tradition holds that sincere intention in any language carries the spiritual weight that insincere performance in the sacred tongue does not. Say it in your own words. Say it once. Say it with your hands touching the wall where you have placed the letters, and then stand in silence for 1 full minute, not 30 seconds, a complete minute. In that minute, you are allowing the declaration to settle into the space. The Kabbalistic term for this settling is hitkalalut, the absorption of one element into another. The spoken intention absorbs into the physical space. The physical space absorbs into the ongoing life of the household. The practice is complete. Let me tell you what to watch for in the 7 days that follow, because the tradition is specific about this, and I want you to have the correct frame for interpreting what you experience. In the first 2 to 3 days, what tends to appear first is not financial movement. It is a clarity about something that has been unclear. A person you have been thinking about contacts you without knowing you were thinking of them. A solution to a problem that had felt circular presents itself from an unexpected angle. A conversation that had been difficult becomes suddenly navigable. These are not coincidences in the tradition's framework. These are the first fruits of the threshold, the first movements of the chesed frequency that has been established at the gate. They are signs of life in the channel, not the fullness of the channel itself. Acknowledge them. The tradition is specific. First fruits must be recognized. A channel whose fruits arrive without acknowledgement does not know the fruits have arrived. Recognize the small movements. Name them, even internally. I have observed this practice applied by enough people over enough years to say with the confidence of observation, not of guarantee, that what tends to follow the correct application of all 3 components across the 7 days that follow is an increase in the quality and frequency of meaningful encounters, conversations, and opportunities that present themselves at and through the household's threshold. Contacts reappear after years of silence. Referrals arrive from directions that cannot be explained by any active networking effort. Doors that were not knocked on open. Whether you understand this as the result of spiritual mechanics or as the result of the shift in internal posture that the practice produces, the shift in how you cross your own threshold twice a day, the reminder of what frequency your home is committed to, the results tend to be the same. Something moves that was still. There is one caution I must give you, and it is important enough that I want you to hear it carefully. This practice can be undermined from the inside, even when it is correctly established at the threshold. The ancient teachers described this as the problem of the prepared gate and the unprepared household. A gate of chesed opening into an interior still operating at the frequency of din. The 2 letters above the door are not a mechanism that overrides the internal state of the home. They are a declaration that invites alignment. If the household inside continues to operate with speech that diminishes, if money is spoken about with contempt or scarcity or blame, if family members speak about financial possibility with consistent cynicism, if the interior conversation contradicts what the threshold declares, the practice loses its integrity. The gate and the household must move toward alignment together. This is not a demand for performed positivity. It is an invitation to begin governing the interior speech about money and provision with the same intentionality you are bringing to the threshold. The letters above the door will remind you every time you see them. Every departure becomes a prompt. Every return becomes an opportunity to bring the frequency of the exterior back into alignment with the declaration of the interior. This is why the tradition placed them facing inward. The letters are not for the world outside. They are for you. What I have given you today is complete enough to produce real movement when applied with all 3 components intact. But I want to be honest with you about what this practice sits inside. The threshold teaching is one layer of a larger architectural system that the Kabbalistic tradition developed for the Jewish home as a financial and spiritual instrument. In the complete body of work I have built over 37 years, drawing from the primary texts and from the oral teachings I received from teachers in Israel, in Eastern Europe, and in the Sephardic communities of North Africa, This threshold practice connects directly to the table practice that governs what is received into the home, to the morning sequence that governs the state of the vessel before it goes out through the gate, and to the weekly Shabbat reset that determines the frequency the household carries into the following week. These pieces work as a unified system. One piece alone produces movement. The full system produces transformation. The link to the complete teaching is in the description. If you are ready for the full architecture, everything you need is there. Move while the clarity is present. Let me prepare you for the specific test that this practice produces, because without this preparation, most people abandon what they have built at exactly the wrong moment. Within the first 48 hours of placing the letters, sometimes sooner, something will arrive that appears to directly contradict the intention you established. A deal falls through. An expected payment is delayed. A relationship that seemed to be moving toward an opportunity goes quiet. The ancient teachers called this the test of the gate, the moment the spiritual architecture is examined for integrity before it is activated at full capacity. This is the moment when almost everyone who does not know about the test abandons the practice. They place the letters, they make the declaration, and then something contracts, and they conclude the practice does not work. But that conclusion, made in the moment of contraction, spoken in the shadow of the disappointment, is itself the test. The practice is asking, do you trust the gate you have established, or do you trust the panic of the moment? The answer you give through your continued practice, through your continued governance of the interior speech, through your refusal to speak negatively over what you have built, that answer determines whether the gate remains open or whether the contraction closes it. Hold the practice. Do not speak death over your own threshold. What you receive today is ancient, it is specific, and it is yours to apply beginning tonight. Share this video with one person in your life whose home you want to see open to what it is meant to receive. When you become a channel for this wisdom to reach someone else, you multiply your own reception of it. This is the tradition's teaching on transmission, and it is not charity. It is circulation. Subscribe if you are not already, and turn on the notification bell. Next week, I am returning to the table, to the specific Friday night Shabbat practice that the most financially grounded families in the Jewish tradition have used for generations to set the economic frequency for the entire week that follows. That teaching connects directly to what I shared today. The gate and the table work together as a unified instrument, and you will not want to have one without understanding the other. And if today's teaching landed in you as something real, if you already know which wall above which door you are placing these letters on, if you know it before I have even finished speaking, press the like button. Let the platform carry this to someone who is standing at their own threshold right now, not knowing what to write above it. May the gate of your home be a gate of chesed. May Shin and Dalet above your threshold be a declaration that does not waver and a sign whose meaning deepens every time you see it. May what crosses your threshold arrive already tuned to the frequency of abundance. May what leaves through your gate go out carrying that same frequency into every encounter, every conversation, every opportunity that the world beyond your door holds. May the letters you place with your own hand and your own intention mark the beginning of a new chapter in the story of your household. Shalom.